The sky burned orange and red as Commander Alex Drake crashed through the thick jungle canopy. His small exploration pod spun wildly, tearing through branches before slamming hard into the muddy ground. Metal groaned and sparks flew as the ship slid a few feet before finally stopping against a giant root-covered tree. Smoke filled the air. Alex coughed hard and struggled out of the broken cockpit. His head throbbed and blood trickled down his forehead, but he was alive. Somehow. He grabbed the small survival pack from under the seat and stumbled into the open. The planet was nothing like the charts had shown. Massive trees towered into the sky, their leaves purple and silver. Strange cries echoed through the dense mist. The air was heavy, sweet, and dangerous. Alex knew one thing. If he stayed here alone, he wouldn't survive long. He wiped the blood from his eyes and started moving carefully, scanning the area for threats. But he was already too late. Hidden in the bushes, dark eyes watched him. Shadows moved silently between the trees. The hunters had found him. Before Alex could even react, thick ropes flew through the air, wrapping around his arms and legs. He struggled hard, but more ropes tangled him, pulling him to the ground. Figures emerged from the mist, tall beings with bronze-colored skin, long horns curving from their heads, and fierce tribal tattoos covering their muscular bodies. Their eyes gleamed with wild excitement. One of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward. He wore a necklace of polished bones and carried a heavy stone spear. He pointed it at Alex and barked out a harsh command in an alien tongue. Alex gritted his teeth. He didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. He was their prisoner. 2 warriors lifted him easily and dragged him through the jungle. Alex caught glimpses of their village as they approached. Huts made of woven leaves and bones, fires burning in large pits, and strange totems carved with symbols he didn't recognize. Alien children peeked out from behind huts, whispering and pointing at him. The warriors threw Alex down onto a raised stone platform at the center of the village. Around him, the tribe gathered quickly, forming a wide circle. They clapped their hands rhythmically and chanted low songs that sent vibrations through the air. A few warriors began stacking wood under the platform. Alex's heart dropped. They weren't just capturing him. They were preparing to cook him. He struggled against the ropes, but they were tight and expertly tied. Several warriors smeared some kind of thick oil on the wood. Others sharpened long knives, their faces painted in bright colors. Alex's mind raced. He had to think, had to act. But how? He had no weapons, no backup, no translator, nothing. And worse, the tribe didn't seem interested in talking. They danced. Faster, louder, raising the knives toward the darkening sky. The fire below him crackled to life. The heat licked at his boots. Panic rose in Alex's chest, but he forced it down. Fear wouldn't save him. He scanned the crowd desperately, searching for anything, anyone that looked different. And then he saw her. From the largest hut at the edge of the village, a figure stepped out. She was tall and slender, wrapped in robes that glowed softly with silver threads. Her skin was bronze like the others, but her tattoos were different, more elegant, more sacred. Her long black hair was braided with beads and feathers, and in her hand she carried a tall wooden staff carved with swirling symbols. The chanting stopped the moment she appeared. Everyone dropped to their knees. Even the fierce warriors bowed their heads. The woman walked slowly toward the platform where Alex lay tied. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and for a moment Alex felt like she could see straight into his soul. She said something in a soft but powerful voice. The warriors froze. The fire under Alex was kicked apart, sending a shower of sparks into the air. 2 warriors moved forward and cut the ropes binding his arms and legs. Alex sat up quickly, rubbing his wrists, utterly confused. The tall woman leaned down slightly, studying him. She tapped her chest with her staff and spoke a single word. Savani. Then, she tapped Alex's chest and said, Starborn. The crowd gasped. The woman turned to the tribe and raised her staff high. She spoke in a melodic, commanding voice. Alex couldn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She wasn't calling him an enemy. She was calling him a sign. The tribe began to murmur in awe. Alex blinked in disbelief. 5 minutes ago they were about to roast him alive. Now, it looked like he had been upgraded to something else entirely. But what? And why had the priestess, this Savani, saved him? The answers were hidden behind her golden eyes. And Alex knew. He had just stumbled into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. The village buzzed like a disturbed hive. After the priestess, Savani, halted the ritual, confusion spread among the tribe. Warriors muttered nervously. Elders huddled together, speaking in fast, worried tones. Children peeked wide-eyed from behind woven fences. Alex stood awkwardly at the center of it all, no longer tied, but still very much a prisoner. He rubbed his sore wrists, feeling the many eyes burning into him. He didn't know whether he was a guest, a god, or still dinner. Savani stepped closer to him. Her tall staff glowed faintly under the dying sunlight. Her golden eyes studied him carefully, as if searching for something beyond his skin, beyond the battered flight suit he wore. She spoke again, slowly, clearly, repeating the words. Starborn, gift of the sky. Alex shook his head, confused. I'm just a guy who crash-landed here, he muttered. Savani tilted her head slightly, her long black braid swinging gently. She didn't understand his words. But somehow she seemed to understand him. She turned to the tribe and raised her arms. The villagers fell silent. In a powerful, flowing voice, she addressed them. Though Alex couldn't understand the language, he caught fragments, gestures to the stars, hands pressed over hearts, fingers pointing to him. The meaning was clear enough. He was important, a gift, or maybe a test. The tribe listened respectfully, but Alex noticed many angry glares among the crowd, especially from a massive warrior standing near the central fire. His arms were crossed and his tattoos were darker, harsher. His horns were sharpened at the tips like blades. This was someone important and someone dangerous. Savani finished her speech and turned back to Alex. She beckoned him with one hand to follow. Alex hesitated, glancing at the angry faces in the crowd. One wrong move and things could turn deadly again. But what choice did he have? He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The tribe parted to let them pass. Some bowed low. Others spat at the ground. Savani led him away from the central square toward the largest hut at the village's edge, the one decorated with shimmering beads, sacred symbols, and feathers from creatures he couldn't even name. Inside, the air was cooler and smelled of strange herbs. The walls were covered in beautiful paintings, scenes of starships, strange beasts, and beings who looked suspiciously like humans stepping down from burning clouds. At the center of the room stood a simple stone bowl filled with glowing water. Savani knelt beside it and gestured for Alex to sit. He lowered himself slowly onto a woven mat, never taking his eyes off her. She dipped her fingers into the glowing water and, with surprising tenderness, traced 3 symbols onto his forehead. They tingled against his skin, almost humming with warmth. Then, she reached into a pouch and pulled out a flat piece of stone. On it, she drew shapes quickly. Stars, planets, a crashing object. Alex leaned closer. The drawing clearly showed a ship, falling from the sky. His ship. Then she drew a figure, small, standing under a great tree, and above it, a glowing hand reaching down from the stars. Alex frowned. Was this a prophecy? Had they been waiting for someone like him? Or had they simply decided he was the answer because he fit their story? Before he could ask, Savani tapped his chest gently and then touched her own heart. It was a gesture not of control, but of connection. Alex felt it deep inside. This wasn't about power, it wasn't about fear. It was about hope, maybe even desperation. She needed him for something. And judging by the tension still hanging over the village like a thundercloud, not everyone agreed with her decision. Alex leaned back, exhaling slowly. He was no hero, no chosen savior. He was just a man who had crashed in the wrong place at the wrong time. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what they needed. Before he could speak, a horn sounded sharply from outside. Shouts erupted. Savani's face hardened. Instantly. She rose and motioned for Alex to stay hidden. Grabbing her staff, she rushed out into the village. Alex peered through the curtain of vines covering the hut's entrance. Outside, the big warrior he had noticed earlier, the one with the blade-like horns, was shouting at the crowd. His voice was full of anger and challenge. Many warriors nodded along with him, gripping their weapons tightly. They didn't want a starborn guest. They wanted the old ways, the ways of blood and fire. Alex sat back against the cool wall, heart pounding. He wasn't just a stranger here. He was a spark. And soon he realized this entire tribe might burn because of him. The firelight flickered through the gaps in the woven hut walls. Alex sat quietly inside, his back pressed against the cool earth wall, every muscle tense. Outside, angry voices rose and fell, warriors shouting and arguing in a language he couldn't understand, but the message was clear. They didn't want him here. They still wanted him cooked. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to think. He needed a plan. Running wasn't an option. Fighting alone against a whole tribe, that was suicide. His best, and maybe only chance, was Savani, the priestess who had saved his life. But why had she saved him? And what did she want in return? The curtain of vines parted softly. Savani entered, her white robes whispering against the floor. Her face was calm, but Alex could see the worry behind her golden eyes. Without speaking, she knelt before him. She carried a small wooden board covered in soft sand. Setting it down between them, she drew simple pictures with her finger. First, she sketched a figure falling from the sky. Him. Then she drew a tree with deep roots and a flame rising beside it. Then, two paths. One leading to light, the other to darkness. Alex leaned closer. He pointed to himself and then to the two paths, raising his eyebrows. She nodded solemnly. He was at the center of some ancient choice. Savani picked up a second stick and offered it to him. Slowly, carefully, Alex drew a rough star, then a figure with outstretched hands. A simple question. Peace. Savani smiled warmly for the first time. She drew a symbol he hadn't seen before, an open hand reaching upward, an old sign of friendship. Without thinking, Alex placed his own hand flat over the symbol. For a moment, the sand on the board glowed, faintly. Their eyes met. No words were needed. Trust had begun to form. Not perfect, not complete, but enough. Later that night, while the village quieted under the twin moons, Savani returned again carrying food, a plate of roasted fruits and soft bread. Alex ate carefully, grateful beyond words. After he finished, Savani sat opposite him once more. She pulled out a small pouch and sprinkled fine dust into the air. The dust shimmered, forming images above them. Floating in the air were pictures of great starships, cities built among trees, and beings of light walking. Alongside her people, Alex watched, fascinated. It was a story of the old times. The tribe had once been part of something much greater, connected to the stars themselves. But then something changed. The light faded, the cities crumbled, the people turned inward, forgetting who they had once been. Savani tapped the image of a starship gently and then tapped Alex's chest. You came from the stars. You are a reminder. You are a choice. Alex swallowed hard. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like a savior. He was just a lost pilot trying not to get eaten. But maybe, just maybe, to these people, he was something more. He pointed at the images again at the old cities, then made a rising motion with his hands. Rebuild? Savani's eyes widened with hope. She nodded quickly, the beads in her hair clicking softly. In that quiet moment, Alex understood. This wasn't just about survival. It was about helping an entire people remember what they had lost, and what they could become again. But outside the hut, danger brewed. He could hear footsteps in the darkness, not the quiet, respectful steps of villagers. Heavy, angry steps. The warriors were not done, and Alex's new friendship with Savani had made him even more dangerous in their eyes. A target. He looked at the sand drawings once more, then at the priestess. They were building something fragile between them, a bridge. But he knew bridges could be burned far faster than they could be built, especially when fear ruled the hearts of men, or aliens. Later, as Alex drifted into uneasy sleep, he dreamt of fire, of angry faces, of standing alone in a ring, of flames while shadows closed in and across the fire. He saw Savani, reaching out her hand toward him, a silent promise that he wouldn't face the darkness alone. But promises, he knew, were easily broken. And in the cold hours before dawn, a new plan was already unfolding in the hearts of his enemies, a plan to finish what had been started the moment he fell from the sky. At dawn, the drums began. Their deep, hollow beats echoed across the jungle, shaking the air, waking every living thing for miles around. Alex snapped awake inside, the hut heart-pounding. Outside, the villagers gathered, their faces painted in fierce colors, their eyes cold and watchful. The smell of burning herbs filled the air. Something big was about to happen. Savani entered the hut quickly, her expression serious. She spoke, a few words he couldn't understand, but she pointed firmly toward the center of the village, toward the stone platform where the fire had nearly consumed him days before. Alex stood up, tense. He understood without needing translation. Today, he would be tested, but this time it wouldn't be ropes and fire. This time he would have a chance to prove himself, or fail, and face a worse fate. In the center of the village, a huge crowd had gathered. At the heart of it, 3 sacred trials had been prepared. A long path of burning stones glowing red-hot under the morning sun. A heavy sacred relic, a massive, carved stone idol resting on a high pedestal. And at the far end, a maze of blinding smoke and shifting walls, filled with traps and illusions. Savani stood at the side of the platform, her staff planted firmly in the ground. Beside her stood the warlord, the massive blade-horned warrior who had opposed Alex from the beginning. His arms were crossed, his face full of smug confidence. He wanted Alex to fail. He needed Alex to fail. Savani raised her hand and the village fell silent. She spoke in a strong voice, pointing first at Alex, then at the trials. Alex took a deep breath. There was no turning back. The first trial, the walk of fire. The burning stones stretched before him, a river of heat and pain. Alex stripped off his torn boots, feeling the cool dirt under his feet. He could already feel the heat radiating from the stones. He swallowed hard. He had no special powers, no magic, only willpower, and a stubborn refusal to die today. The first step seared like knives into his soles. He clenched his jaw and moved forward. One step, another, another. Every step sent fire shooting up his legs. The tribe watched silently, some with awe, some with cruel amusement. Halfway through, he stumbled, almost falling. The warlord laughed loudly, but Alex gritted his teeth and pushed forward, sweat pouring down his face. Finally, he reached the end, collapsing onto the cool earth. Savani smiled quietly and gave a slight nod. 1 trial survived, 2 more to go. The second trial, the test of strength. The sacred idol was enormous, carved from black stone, covered in ancient symbols. Alex approached it, every muscle already burning from the walk of fire. He wrapped his arms around the base, feeling its cold, rough surface. The goal was simple. Lift it from the pedestal, even. For a second, he planted his feet, dug deep, pulled. The idol didn't move. The villagers chuckled. The warlord smirked. Alex closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, of the friends he had lost, of the loneliness he carried. He thought of Savani, standing silently behind him, believing in him when no one else did. With a roar, He summoned every ounce of strength left in his battered body. The idol shifted. An inch. 2 inches. He lifted it, just enough for the crowd to see the light beneath it. A huge cheer went up among the villagers, some surprised, some angry. Alex dropped the idol and fell to one knee, gasping for air. Savani's eyes shone with pride. 2 trials down. 1 left. The 3rd trial. The maze of smoke. The warriors pushed Alex toward the edge of a dense fog that rolled and twisted unnaturally across a narrow field. Somewhere inside, traps, waited. If he got through, he would earn respect. If not, he might never come out at all. Alex stepped into the smoke. Instantly, the world vanished. He saw shifting shadows, heard whispers that sounded like his own voice. Walls of thorny vines appeared and disappeared. Pits opened under his feet. It was a test not just of strength, but of mind. He moved slowly, feeling his way forward. Every wrong step cut into him. Every right choice moved him closer to freedom. Finally, he saw a break in the smoke, a bright light. He ran for it and burst out into the open, falling hard onto the dirt. The villagers gasped in shock. He had made it, all 3 trials, broken, bleeding, exhausted, but standing. Savani stepped forward, lifting his hand high into the air. The tribe roared, not just in anger, but in new respect. Even the warlord scowled, his fists clenching, but he said nothing. Alex looked up at the blue sky above, chest heaving. He had survived, but deep inside, he knew survival was just the beginning. Because in the shadows behind the cheering crowd, dark plans were already being made. Plans that would test not just his body but his heart. Plans that would decide the fate of everyone, himself, the priestess, and the future of the tribe. The village slept under a heavy silver moon. Soft winds moved through the huts, carrying the scent of burnt wood and wet leaves. The fires had burned low, and the drums were silent now, replaced only by the soft breathing of 100 sleeping villagers. But Alex couldn't sleep. He sat inside his small hut, staring at the glowing embers of his fire, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders. The trials had ended. He had survived, earned their respect. For now. But respect, he knew, could turn to fear, and fear could turn to violence, especially when powerful enemies still lurked in the shadows. A soft sound outside the hut made him stiffen. He reached for the sharpened stick he had kept close since the first night. The vines at the entrance shifted slightly. Figure slipped inside. Alex raised the stick but stopped. It was Savani. Her face was pale, her golden eyes urgent. She placed a finger to her lips. Silence. She crossed quickly to him and whispered in broken, halting words, "Bad men. Come. Tonight." Alex's blood ran cold. Before he could respond, another sound came. Heavy boots crunching over the soft earth outside. Voices low and angry. Savani grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the back of the hut, where a small opening led to the outer fields. Together they slipped into the dark. They moved swiftly through the thick mist, the moonlight guiding their steps. Behind them, warriors stormed into Alex's empty hut, weapons raised. One of them, the warlord himself, let out a roar of rage when he found it empty. Torches were lit. The hunt had begun. Savani and Alex ran low through the tall grasses, heading toward the edge of the sacred forest. They couldn't outrun the whole tribe, not for long. "Why now?" Alex panted. "Why betray after the trials?" Savani looked at him with deep sadness. "Fear," she said simply. They reached the cover of trees just as a volley of spears whistled through the air. One grazed Alex's shoulder, ripping his sleeve. He stumbled but kept moving. From the trees ahead, another figure emerged, a young warrior. His face painted black, a curved blade in his hand. He raised it high. Alex had no weapon except the stick, but he didn't hesitate. He lunged, knocking the warrior's arm aside and grabbing the blade by the handle. The two struggled in the dark, rolling over the damp earth. Finally, Alex twisted free and stood over the fallen warrior, breathing hard. He didn't kill him. He tossed the blade into the bushes and ran after Savani. Killing would only make things worse. Deeper in the forest, they found a hidden hollow under the roots of a massive tree. Savani pulled him inside, covering the entrance with leaves and branches. They sat close, breathless, listening to the angry voices passing nearby. The warriors searched the woods, their torches bobbing like small stars in the mist. Alex leaned his head back against the tree, closing his eyes. He felt exhaustion clawing at him, pulling him down, but he couldn't give in. Not yet. Savani touched his arm gently. When he opened his eyes, she was looking at him with fierce determination. "No more run," she whispered. "Fight. Save." Alex nodded slowly. He understood. Running would not save them. The tribe was breaking apart. Old ways versus new hope. He couldn't leave them to tear themselves apart. Not after all he had seen. Not after what he had promised. And not after the bond he had built with Savani. He would fight, but not for revenge. For the future. For the chance to rebuild something better. Even if it cost him everything. At dawn, when the mist lifted and the first rays of sun touched the village, a new figure stood at the heart of the broken square. Alex Drake. Not as a prisoner, not as a sacrifice, but as a challenge. He stood tall, weapon in hand, defying the warlord and his followers openly. Beside him stood Savani, her staff glowing with a soft, rising light. The tribe gathered quickly, stunned by the sight. And as the sun rose fully into the sky, Alex shouted a single, clear message in the only language everyone understood. "No more fear, no more blood. Choose a new way or lose everything." The warlord roared and stepped forward, weapon raised. The final battle had begun. But Alex was ready, because sometimes it's not strength that wins a war. It's the courage to stand when no one else will. The first blow came fast. The warlord lunged forward, swinging a heavy stone axe with deadly force. Alex barely dodged, feeling the rush of air as the weapon missed his face by inches. He stumbled backward across the village square, heart hammering against his ribs. Around them, the tribe formed a wide circle, watching in tense silence. This wasn't just a fight. It was a decision. If Alex fell, the old ways would reign again. Blood and fear would rule. If he won, maybe, just maybe, there was hope for something better. The warlord snarled, his painted face twisted in rage. He swung again, brutal, wild, confident. Alex didn't try to meet him with strength. Instead, he used speed, ducking under the heavy blow. He struck the warlord's leg with his staff, sending the giant stumbling. The crowd gasped. Savani stood at the edge of the circle. Her hands clenched tightly around her glowing staff, her golden eyes wide with hope and fear. The warlord recovered quickly, roaring louder. He wasn't just fighting Alex anymore. He was fighting the future. The duel dragged on, brutal and exhausting. Alex moved like a shadow, staying just out of reach, forcing the warlord to tire himself. He knew he couldn't win by strength. He had to outthink him, outlast him. Every time he dodged, every time he landed a quick blow to the warlord's arms or legs, the giant grew angrier and slower. Finally, Alex saw his chance. As the warlord raised his axe high for a final crushing blow, Alex threw a handful of dust from the ground into his face. The warlord roared in surprise, blinded for a moment. Alex dropped low, sweeping the warlord's legs from under him with a brutal strike. The giant crashed to the ground, sending up a cloud of dirt. Before he could rise, Alex pressed the tip of his broken spear against the warlord's throat. Silence fell over the village. Every eye was on him. The warlord lay there, gasping, defeated. But Alex didn't kill him. Slowly, carefully, he lowered the spear. He stepped back, raising both hands high. A clear message. Mercy. A choice. The tribe watched in awe. Even those who had cheered for the warlord now whispered among themselves. A leader who could win without killing. Such a thing had not been seen for generations. Savani stepped forward, her robes fluttering in the soft morning breeze. She raised her staff high and spoke words that rang out across the village. Alex couldn't understand them, but he understood the meaning. He wasn't an outsider anymore. He was something more. The villagers dropped to one knee, heads bowed low. Even the warlord, after a long, heavy silence, struck his fist to his chest, a sign of deep, reluctant respect. Alex stood there breathing hard, dust covering his skin, blood drying on his arms. He had gambled everything, his life, his hope, his belief that even among the wildest, fiercest people, something better could be born, and he had won. Not because he was stronger, not because he was smarter, but because he had refused to become what they feared. He had shown them another way. That night, under the stars, a great fire was lit. Not for sacrifice, but for celebration. The tribe feasted. They sang new songs. They painted fresh symbols on the great totems, symbols of change. Alex sat beside Savani at the fire's edge, the sacred circle where only the tribe's true leaders could sit. She smiled at him, warmth in her golden eyes. "You change us," she said softly, her words broken but clear. Alex smiled tiredly. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you were ready to change all along." Savani tilted her head thoughtfully. "Together," she said. Alex raised his cup in a silent toast. Together. Above them, the stars blazed bright and endless. But far beyond those stars, other worlds were beginning to whisper of strange new things happening in the wild places. Whispers of humans who could not be broken, who fought with their hearts instead of their fists. And somewhere deep in the jungle, the old gods stirred in their sleep, smiling at the spark that had been rekindled. A human had come, and nothing would ever be the same again. Morning light bathed the village in soft gold. Smoke from the celebration fire still curled into the clear sky, carrying the scent of roasted fruits and fresh bread. Children laughed as they painted new symbols on the huts, symbols of hope and unity. The old ways had ended, a new future had begun, and at the heart of it all stood Alex Drake, the human who had fallen from the stars and changed everything. He walked slowly through the village, greeted with respectful nods and smiles wherever he went. The same warriors who once tied him to a cooking pit now offered him gifts, rare feathers, carved stones, freshly woven cloth. But Alex didn't want treasures. He wanted something far greater. Future where they didn't need fear to survive. He paused at the sacred tree in the center of the village, the ancient tree older than any living memory. Its twisted roots and silver leaves whispered secrets when the wind passed through. Savani stood there, waiting. Her white robes shimmered in the early sun. Her golden eyes were calm, full of strength. She held in her hands a simple crown made of woven vines and tiny glowing flowers. As Alex approached, she lifted the crown toward him. He shook his head gently. "I'm not a king," he said softly. Savani smiled. "Not king," she said, touching the crown to her heart. "Guide. Light." The tribe gathered silently around them, watching with shining eyes. Alex hesitated, but then slowly, he knelt before her, not because he wanted power, but because he understood. Sometimes the greatest leaders are those who never asked to lead. Savani placed the crown gently on his head. The tribe erupted into cheers, drums beating again, not the drums of war, but the drums of new life. Alex rose to his feet, feeling the weight not of the crown, but of the hope resting on his shoulders. Days turned into weeks. The village changed. Where once fear ruled, now curiosity bloomed. Warriors trained not just for battle, but for building and protecting. Children learned the old songs of the stars. Elders spoke openly of long-forgotten knowledge. Alex worked alongside them every day, teaching what little he knew about healing, building stronger shelters, even simple farming techniques. He taught them what humanity had learned through pain. That survival was not enough. That life was meant to be lived with hope, and they taught him too, the language of the trees, the art of listening to the earth, the strength found in community. Together, they wove a new story, one not written by fear, but by choice. One night, as Alex sat with Savani under the sacred tree, watching the stars wheel overhead, she spoke quietly. "You leave soon," she said. Alex nodded. He had repaired parts of his broken pod using the tribe's materials, enough to call for help from the nearest human colony. He would have to leave one day. But a part of him already knew. This place would always be home. "You have given us much," Savani said. "More than stars, more than fight." She placed her hand gently over his heart. "You gave hope." Alex smiled, feeling the familiar ache of goodbye already stirring. "I only showed you what you already had inside," he said. They sat there in comfortable silence as a shooting star streaked across the night sky. A new beginning. When the rescue ship arrived days later, it hovered silently above the village, casting a long shadow over the fields. The human crew stared in shock at the sight below, an alien tribe standing side by side with a lone human, not as enemies, but as allies, as family. Alex boarded the ship with a heavy heart. At the ramp's edge, he turned and looked back one last time. Savani stood proudly among her people, the sacred tree's silver leaves shining behind her. She raised her staff high, a farewell and a promise. Alex pressed his hand over his heart and bowed deeply. Then the ramp closed, and the ship rose into the sky. Far across the stars, stories began to spread. Stories of a human who had faced death with courage, who had fought not with hate, but with hope, who had entered a wild world and left it forever changed. In quiet halls and crowded markets across distant planets, beings whispered in wonder, "Beware the humans, for they carry more than weapons. They carry dreams. And when they plant them in the soil of the forgotten, they change the stars themselves." And somewhere under a canopy of endless silver trees, a tribe still looked to the night sky, waiting for the day their star-born guide would return.